In this tutorial, we're going to learn to knit a women's sweater, in particular this sweater here. It's knit in top-down raglan style, which means no prior sweater knowledge is necessary. We're going to go through all the steps to finish this up. This is a really satisfying first sweater to knit because it's going to be a guaranteed fit. With this style, you're able to try the sweater on when you're about halfway through to make sure that things are going well, and you'll know things will fit you when you're all finished with the sweater. So we're going to go through the cast on and joining in the round and knitting the ribbing and working the increases over the markers that we place. And then we'll have a big part on how to size the sweater to fit you once you knit down to about here. Then we'll finish the body and go back and knit the sleeves. Next up, we're going to work on the cast on and placing your markers and joining in the round. Okay, we're ready to get started on the sweater. And again, here it is. I've knit this one in kind of a mid-length t-shirt style. Because you're making this yourself, you can make any sleeve length that you like, really. Keep it in mind, any length you like in the body as well. So here's the sweater. If you want to follow along with this pattern that we're using, it's available for purchase and download over on my website. Otherwise, the techniques that we're using here for top-down raglan increases is really the same for any pattern. The increases might be different, but the way that they're worked is just about the same. Now, before you cast on for the sweater, it's really important that you knit a gauge swatch. Now, the reason this is important is that you need to get the same number of stitches per inch as I did when I was designing the pattern if you want your sweater size to be correct. Now, if you've knit hats and scarves and things before, especially with a scarf, you don't ever need to do a gauge swatch with that because if a scarf is this wide or this wide, it's still perfectly useful. But you want your sweater to come out the right size and not put hours and hours of work into something that's huge or tiny when you're finished with it. So this pattern calls for 18 stitches and 23 rows in a 4x4 square. So if you cast on 18 stitches and knit for 23 rows, when you measure the swatch that you've knit, it should be perfectly 4x4. Now, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself because really what you should do is cast on a couple more that it calls for, so you have a selvage edge when you're measuring. And then after you knit for 4 inches, follow the washing instructions on the yarn, on the ball band. This yarn that I've used in the pattern is actually machine washable and dryable. I went ahead and washed it. I did not put it in the dryer. I set it out flat to dry. Once it was dry, that's when I checked gauge. So that's what I want to show you how to do first, is how to check gauge. Now, if you're getting, after you check gauge, if you're getting too many stitches per inch, you need to go up a needle size. If you're getting too few stitches per inch, you need to go down a needle size. And you just keep working on different needle sizes until you get the same gauge that I have. Okay, let's look at the gauge swatch. Here we are, and this, of course, is knit in stockinette, which is knit a row, purl a row, knit a row, purl a row. And what I want to do is, I've cast on more than I need here, so I'm going to mark a spot between 2 stitches. Whoops, almost knocked my coffee over. And then I'm going to measure out 4 inches. And when you do this, don't try to use a tape measure, something soft. It's best to have a ruler for this. Measure out 4 inches and mark that spot. And then all you do is count the stitches between. That's how you check gauge. Now, checking row gauge is really the same thing. You do this, measure out 4 inches, mark the spot, and count between. Row gauge isn't nearly as important on this pattern as stitch gauge because you really just knit the length as long as you want it. I don't ever tell you in the pattern to knit for a certain number of rows for like the body length or the sleeve length. Okay, that's how you're going to get gauge. And now we're going to actually start looking at the cast on of the sweater. I've already cast on most of the stitches for my size. And if you need a review of the long tail cast on, I'll give you a link right here. Okay. We'll say there that I've cast on the right number. And what I need to do now is to join this in the round. so that I can start knitting a big tube, which is the neckline of the sweater. So first thing I'll do is to make sure that nothing is twisted. Actually, I want my working yarn on this side. And I do that by setting this out and looking at all the little knots from the cast on. Everything's lined up on the inside and nothing is twisted. Then I want to get a little ring marker ready because I'm going to need that to mark the beginning of my round. Okay, I take my ring marker and I just put it on the right hand needle before I get going. Separate the tail from the working yarn. Still nothing's twisted. Being careful about that. Then the neckline for this sweater is knit one, purl one, rib. So I'll start by knitting the first stitch, giving that stitch a good tug to minimize the gap there. Now I'm going to purl the next stitch. So I pull the yarn forward between the two needles and purl. I'm going to go back to knitting, so I put the yarn back between the two needles and knit. Forward to purl, back to knit. Just like that. And every time the pattern, you're going to finish knitting, let me back up here, you're going to finish knitting the ribbing for as long as the pattern tells you to, and then you're going to do a setup round where you're placing markers. And remember, to place a marker, you just take a little ring marker and throw it on the right needle and just keep going. And then when you knit up to a marker, all you do is slide it from the left needle to the right needle. And one more thing I want you to remember is when you're going to end up placing 1, 2, 3, 4 markers. You need to do something special with the marker at the beginning of your round because it's going to look like all the rest if you don't. I always put, let me see if I can find it. I always put a little clippy marker in my work like this to show me where the beginning of my round is, because otherwise all the markers look the same. Even though they're different colors, if I don't remember which color I put for the beginning, I'll forget. After you finish knitting the ribbing at the collar, next up we're going to start the raglan increases. Now that you've finished the ribbing at the neckline, we're ready to go into the raglan increases, which is actually going to shape the whole sweater. And the raglan increases, I have the sweater folded in half here, it's these right here. And in this sweater we have kind of a decorative yarn over thing going on, which kind of makes this more of a lightweight summer kind of a top. And let's get started right away, right into that. Okay, hopefully your work looks something like this. I'm just about to the beginning of my round. I've already done the setup round where I've placed the markers. I'm going to knit up to the end of my round. Okay, I'll slip the marker here and knit one. And then I'm going to do a yarn over, which is what is going to give us the increases. To yarn over, I pull the yarn forward between the two needles and keep going. And what that does is it gives us kind of a fakey stitch on the needle here with a hole underneath it. And the hole is what gives us that decorative look on the raglan increases. And this is also increasing by a stitch. So what you're going to do every time you come to a marker is you knit to one stitch before the marker, yarn over, knit one, slip marker, knit one, yarn over, and you keep going. And you'll do the same thing at each one of the markers all the way around, every other round. Between the increase rounds, you just do a plain knit round. Now, let's talk about it again. You knit to one stitch before the marker, yarn over, knit one, slip marker, knit one, yarn over. That's the way you're going to do it. It gets to be really fun knitting. It's good TV knitting because you don't have to concentrate a lot. Also, when you need to add a new ball of yarn, let me pull the sweater out here. Here's a detail on the raglan increases. And the marker sits right here. When you need to add a new ball of yarn, I recommend doing it on one of these two stitches here. With the yarn that I'm using in this sweater, it's not wool, so I can't spit splice it together, so I'm going to need to tie a knot. And this is a good place to do it. You don't want to do it in any of the smooth part of the sweater because it will show up. So for the increased part of the sweater, tie in a new ball of yarn in these 2 stitches, really anywhere in the sweater, not anything specific there. Okay, you're going to keep knitting and knitting with these Raglan Increases and following the size that you're knitting. At some point you're going to need to try the sweater on, which we're going to cover in the next video. To do that, you're going to need to slip this to scrap yarn. I always use sock yarn like this. You take a tapestry needle, and just a quick review on how you slide things to scrap yarn. You just put your needle in there and slip as if to purl to the needle, and then pull it onto the scrap yarn. And do that all the way around for the whole sweater, and then your stitches are safely reserved and you can try the sweater on. And I'll show you. This is about what it'll look like when you're ready to try it on. And I've put my needles back in, but everything is still here on this scrap yarn. Next up, we're going to talk about sizing and trying the sweater on and seeing if you're ready to separate for the sleeves. Okay, you're at a point in the sweater now where you have strung it to strap yarn so you can try it on, and that's either because you're following the pattern and your size says that you should now, or you have an instinct that it might be time to stop with the Raglan Increases because it's going to fit you, or you're just curious to how close you're getting. So I have this already off the needles and on scrap yarn, and I'm going to use the mannequin here to show you how to make sure this is going to fit when it's done. So this is still just a big open piece like this. We're going to try it on. And you'll have an easier time trying this on because you have arms. I would never actually try the sweater just on the mannequin here. I always put it on my own body to make sure. Okay, so there we go. Now the way to make sure this is going to fit is you find the marker at the end of each of the Raglan Increases, here and here, and put those 2 together. And you can clip them together or have someone hold them together. It's hard to hold on to it yourself. And when you hold that together, if there's plenty of room for your arm in the sleeve and around the bust, then you know that it's going to fit. To even better fine-tune that, you can make sure that it's hitting you under the arm where you want it to hit. If you want this to be kind of a fitted t-shirt, you probably want it to fit up higher under your arm. If you want this to be looser and more casual, then you want to have it fit lower under your arm. But if you clip these together, sometimes what I do is I use a little safety pin clip these together before I put it on, then slide the whole thing on and see how it fits and see if I'm liking the way it fits. Because this is really the crucial point of the whole sweater in seeing how things fit. Because from here on out, we're just going to knit the body and knit the sleeves and everything's going to be separated. We're not going to be able to change the size after that. This is why this design of a sweater is just, you can't fail at this. It's always going to fit when you're done. Anyway, if you find that you're not quite there yet, just slide your needle back into the stitches and keep going with the Raglan Increases for a while. If you are there, you still need to put this back on the needle because next up we're going to talk about what you do when you find that you have the right size. Now that you're sure the sweater is really going to fit, it's time to separate the sleeves. And what that means is we're going to take all of the sleeves that we've been knitting, all the stitches we've been knitting for the sleeves, put them on scrap yarn to reserve them, and just finish knitting the body by itself. And in the next video, we'll go back and pick up the sleeve, pick up those stitches to actually knit the sleeves. Let's take a look at our work. I still have everything on the scrap yarn from trying it on. And now I need to get this back on the needles. And to do that, I'm actually working from the wrong side here. I'm just taking, I've done most of it here. I'm just taking my needle and putting it back through each one of the stitches Scrap yarn's still in there, no problem. If you've picked a lightweight scrap yarn, there's room for both. Careful with those yarn overs. Okay, I'm back up to the beginning of my round now. Everything's on the needle. I tied a knot in my scrap yarn, so I'm going to break that out and just pull the scrap yarn out of the work. Oops. I can see my scrap yarn is getting caught up here. This happens, it split a little bit. It's a lot of stitches to pull the scrap yarn out of. Okay, this should make it easier. Okay, here we go. No more scrap yarn. And here I am at the beginning of my round. Actually, that scrap yarn thing made me almost lose a couple of stitches here. I need to quickly pick those up. Okay. All right, here we are at the beginning of the round. And all of the stitches that between the markers, that are close between the markers, there aren't very many stitches, this is a sleeve here. The bits that have a lot of stitches between the markers, these are the front and the back. So I want to put these stitches here, these sleeve stitches. I just lost a stitch again. I want to put these sleeve stitches on scrap yarn to reserve them. And so I've got a piece of the same scrap yarn in my tapestry needle. And you're good at this because we already slipped everything to scrap yarn to try it on. I went ahead and took out the first marker, and I'm going to slide all of these sleeve stitches onto the scrap yarn. Your knitting is going to get a whole lot faster here because you're going to have fewer stitches to work in every round. Okay, I can take out the second marker also. Now, what I need to do is cast on, I'm going to knit from here to here, and I need to cast on a couple of stitches here over the gap. And to do that, I'm going to use the backwards loop cast on. You'll follow the pattern to see how many you need to cast on. I'm going to do 2. And all you do is wrap the yarn around your thumb and slide it onto the needle. Like that. I did an extra one, so I'll take that off. And then I just keep knitting like that sleeve wasn't even there. Okay, and you see here, these sleeve stitches are just going to hang out on the scrap yarn until we come back to them. And you'll do the same thing when you come to the next marker. Slide all these stitches onto the scrap yarn, use the backwards loop method to cast on 2 stitches, and just keep going to the end of the round. You can follow the pattern to determine how long you want to knit the body for the size that you're knitting, but really it's entirely up to you. I usually like to add a little bit of extra length on the body whenever I make a sweater, and then you're going to knit a little bit more ribbing to match what you did at the neckline at the bottom of the sweater, and you'll be done. You can bind off, you're done with the bottom of the sweater. Next up, we're going to talk about knitting the sleeves on double pointed needles. You should have a pretty much finished sweater that needs sleeves. That's all we have left to do in the knitting part. And for this, you're going to need double pointed needles. We're going to knit in a tiny tube, and your circular needles won't fit around there, so we'll get some good practice in with double pointed needles. Let's go ahead and take a look at the work. Mine looks a little different than yours because I have not finished the body on this yet, but the sleeve part will look just like yours. This is the sleeves hanging out on the scrap yarn. And I've already put double pointed needles into this other sleeve here, like this. Now I've just separated the stitches about 1/3 on each needle. And since you're an expert at getting things off scrap yarn and onto needles, I'll let you go ahead and do that on your own. Now here is the underarm area. And remember, we cast on 2 stitches here. We're going to pick up 2 stitches as we knit across this. So I have the underarm area facing me, and I have a new ball of yarn ready to go, so we're going to attach a new ball of yarn. There's one of the stitches I picked up, and there's the other one. I'm going to put my needle into the one to the left. This is going to be the new beginning of my round. Get my yarn ready to go. I'm just going to wrap it around the needle and pull it through. There, I just picked up and knit 1 stitch. Now I'm going to continue knitting across this next double pointed needle. If you've never used double pointed needles before, it's really no different than knitting with 2 needles. You're still only using 2 needles at a time. It looks really complicated, but it's not as complicated as you might think. And the sleeves are just plain knitting, nothing fancy. When you get to the end of the first needle, you just give your work a little turn, and there's your next stitch. And I always know where my next stitch is because I find my working yarn, and the stitch to the left of that is my next stitch. Okay, I'm at the end of the next needle. Give it a quick turn. Here's my working yarn, so I know my next stitch is on this needle. Okay, when I get to the end of the last needle, I want to pick up the other stitch that I cast on under the arm. So using this same needle, I'm going to put my needle under both legs of that stitch. I'm picking up 2 strands there, wrap it and pull it through. And right now is an excellent opportunity to tie the tail end to the working yarn. You are at the beginning of your round, and things are going to stay a lot tidier if you tie a double knot right there. And there you go. You just keep going around and around and knit for the length of sleeve you want or the pattern tells you to. You'll finish up knitting the length of the sleeve, and then you have some more 1x1 rib to finish off the bottom of the sleeve, and you'll pretty much be finished with the sweater. Next up, we're going to talk about some of the finishing work to do on the sweater. Now that you have a finished sweater, it's time to just finish up some of the details to make it look really good so you're ready to wear it and everything else. The first thing I want to show you how to do is to correct the jog you might see at the neckline, your cast on row. When you join things in the round, sometimes things will be half a stitch off and create a jog in the neckline of your sweater. I don't have a very exaggerated jog on this one here, but I want to show you how to correct it regardless. So let's take a look at the work. Here is, well, we're pretending again because this is not a finished sweater, but the neckline jog is the same. And I'm going to exaggerate it a little bit. This is a lot of times what you'll see. You'll have your end here, and then it'll jump up like that and go around the rest of the round like that. So I'm going to take my tapestry needle, and this is how I'm going to correct it. I'm going to mimic what we see here in the cast on row to smooth it out. Now if I feel around, I can feel that this right here is my slip knot. That's kind of what I'm going for here too, as my guide. I'm going to go in just past the slip knot, like this, and then go back down into the same spot I came out of with my working yarn. Once I really pull that up and get the slip knot, I actually think I went too far under there. Nice thing about this is you can see what you're doing and fix it if you're not happy with it. Now I can't even get this threaded. There we go. Okay. How about we pick up here? There we go, that's perfect. What that did was that created a V that matches all the other V's across the top of the row. And when I give that a tug, it smoothed out that line. Do you see that? Now I just want to weave this end in here. I'm going to actually show you how to weave the end in this yarn with this finished sweater, because I'll show you how to do it in reverse stockinette. I've left these ends out, so I want to show you how I do this. This is not wool. This is a cotton acrylic blend, and the ends will just work their way out if I don't do something to really secure them down. So I'm threading this end on the needle, and I'm just going to pull it a couple stitches away. I'm not doing anything fancy here. I'm just getting it a little bit away from the knot I tied right here, because I don't want to create any more bulk right here. Then I'm going to separate the plies, half and half. This is 4-ply yarn, so I'm separating it 2 and 2. I'm threading 2 of those plies onto my tapestry needle, and then I'm just going to pick up something really close by. The reason for that is I want 2 of the plies coming out of one spot and 2 of them coming out of another. Now I tie an overhand knot, it's not an overhand knot, it's a double knot, and pull it really pretty tightly. We want this to last through washings and everything else. And I take my scissors and I can cut that short. Ta-da, that's not going anywhere. Then I do the same thing with this end and all the other ends. Just pull it a little ways away, separate the plies, put 2 of the plies through a stitch nearby and tie a knot, and then cut it close. Now the way that you block this is really going to depend on the yarn that you're using and what the manufacturer tells you to do. This yarn that I'm using here is machine washable and dryable. I actually hand washed it and then found that I wasn't getting all of the spring out of the ribbing parts that I wanted. So I did put it in the dryer for a little while and then set it out flat to dry for the rest of the drying time. In future washings, I should be able just to wash and dry this normally. But follow your manufacturer's instructions for the yarn that you're using and everything should turn out just fine. Good luck.